So when we last got together for the last word at 10 p.m. on Friday night, Jeff Sessions, who was exposed by Al Franken for not telling the truth in his confirmation hearing, fired Andrew McCabe for not telling the truth. And then yesterday we discovered that 3 unnamed sources now say Jeff Sessions did not tell the truth when he told the House Judiciary Committee that he pushed back against Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos in a campaign meeting when Papadopoulos suggested reaching out to Russia for help during the Trump presidential campaign. It would be nice when you're firing someone for not telling the truth to have never been publicly caught not telling the truth yourself. But that's just about impossible for anyone working in the administration of the greatest liar in the history of the presidency, the most relentless, nonstop, pathological liar in the history of American politics and government, Donald Trump. We still don't know why Andrew McCabe was fired. We do know that the president wanted him fired and publicly urged that he be fired, campaigned for months to have him fired. And we do know that the president did that without having any evidence that Andrew McCabe should be fired. And we now know that the Inspector General, who did not share his evidence with the president, the Inspector General of the Justice Department, recommended that Andrew McCabe be fired last week. But we have not seen the Inspector General's report yet, so we don't know exactly what the Inspector General found. It apparently involved how Andrew McCabe dealt with reporters and the possibility that he was not being completely truthful about how he provided information to a reporter. McCabe says that the Inspector General misinterpreted his answers about that. In a written statement, as we reported Friday night, Andrew McCabe said, "Here is the reality. I am being singled out and treated this way because of the role I played, the actions I took, and the events I witnessed in the aftermath of the firing of James Comey." Andrew McCabe is a witness in the special prosecutor's investigation of the president's possible obstruction of justice. The president's firing of FBI Director James Comey is one of the central elements, if not the proof, of an obstruction of justice case against the president. This weekend, we learned that just like James Comey before him, Andrew McCabe made notes of his discussions with the president when he was the acting FBI director. When that was reported on Saturday, the president tweeted, "Spent very little time with Andrew McCabe, but he never took notes when he was with me. I don't believe he made memos except to help his own agenda, probably at a later date. Same with lying James Comey. Can we call them fake memos?" No, we can't call them fake memos. They are called memos of conversations. And they are very common at the highest levels of government. Memcon. That's what those memos have been called for decades. I first learned about memcons when I was working for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. After we had a meeting in the Oval Office with the president, Senator Moynihan immediately sat down and typed a memcon when we got back to the Senate office. He explained that he had been doing that since he first went to work in President Kennedy's administration. Senator Moynihan was in the cabinet and subcabinet of 4 presidents, Democrat and Republican, and wrote a memcon after every conversation he had with every president. Those presidents all knew that that is what experienced people in government do. They make memos of their important conversations, usually immediately after the fact of the conversation. Donald Trump first discovered this practice when it became public that James Comey did that. I can guarantee him that people in his White House did it today and are doing it every day as soon as they leave the Oval Office. They are making a record of what the president said, which they will then use in their memoirs, if not before, even though we discovered through Ruth Marcus's extraordinary reporting in the Washington Post that the Trump White House personnel are the first in history who have been required to sign non-disclosure agreements. That is a hopelessly unenforceable attempt by Donald Trump to carry on the use of non-disclosure agreements that he required for everyone working in his business, and that he apparently required for every woman that he met at golf tournaments, like Stormy Daniels. There is something exquisitely Trumpian in the fact that Donald Trump is the only president in history who has asked his White House staff to sign non-disclosure agreements, and he has the most talkative, leaking staff in the history of the White House. Andrew McCabe's memos of his conversations with the president, as well as James Comey's memos of his conversations with the president, are important exhibits in Robert Mueller's investigation, which is clearly focused on possible obstruction of justice by the president. This weekend, the New York Times reported Mr. Mueller is said to have sent questions to Mr. Trump's legal team as part of negotiations over an interview with the president. Mr. Mueller is seeking the interview, according to two people close to the White House, in order to ask follow-up questions, but put forward the list as a start. The questions seem to have made the president a bit uncomfortable, if you're reading his mood from Twitter. On Saturday, he tweeted Robert Mueller's name for the first time. The Mueller probe should never have been started, in that there was no collusion and there was no crime. It was based on fraudulent activities in a fake dossier paid for by Crooked Hillary and the DNC and improperly used in FISA court for surveillance of my campaign. Witch hunt! Exclamation point. That was not the tweet of a man who is confident he has done nothing wrong and has nothing to worry about in the investigation. Today, the Washington Post reported that President Trump's attorneys have provided the special counsel's office with written descriptions that chronicle key moments under investigation in hopes of curtailing the scope of a presidential interview, according to two people familiar with the situation. And CNN.com is reporting tonight that Trump's lawyers had a meeting last week about the case. Quote, both sides sat down last week in a rare face-to-face discussion about the topics investigators could inquire of the president. It was the first in-person meeting after several weeks of informal discussions between the two sides, according to two sources familiar with the talks. A well-placed source familiar with the meeting tells NBC News that this sort of meeting actually happens regularly. The president has hired a new lawyer, and like the rest of the president's legal team, the new hire is nowhere near the top of the list of Washington lawyers for cases like this. Joe DeGenova is a familiar face to cable news watchers. He has been commenting on legal affairs on television much more than he has been handling them in courtrooms. Here is his view of the investigation of the president.
There was a brazen plot to illegally exonerate Hillary Clinton, and if she didn't win the election, to then frame Donald Trump with a falsely created crime. Everything that we have seen from these texts and from all the facts developing shows that the FBI and senior DOJ officials conspired to violate the law and to deny Donald Trump his civil rights.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.